A police K-9 suddenly stopped beneath a forgotten bridge and began barking without pause. Moments later, officers discovered 3 Marines left to die, their lives hanging by a thread. But the real shock wasn't just finding them. It was the chilling truth that followed, a truth no one ever expected. What was uncovered next will leave you questioning everything. Here's the full story, but before we roll it, drop the name of your favorite dog in the comments and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, what's coming up next is something you won't want to miss. The night was cold, the kind of biting chill that crept through layers of clothing and left an unsettling stillness in the air. Streetlights flickered dimly along the outskirts of the city, but beneath the old concrete bridge that crossed a forgotten industrial stretch, shadows pressed tight against the ground. Few cars passed by this place and fewer still stopped. It was the sort of area most avoided, isolated, damp, and heavy with the weight of silence. Officer Daniels guided his K-9 partner Rex along the cracked sidewalk during a late patrol. The dog had worked through countless searches before, but something about tonight unsettled him. Rex's ears twitched, his nose lifting into the air as though the still wind carried a message only he could sense. Then, without warning, the dog froze. His body stiffened, tail pointing straight back. He lowered his head, sniffed rapidly, and pulled sharply toward the direction of the underpass. Daniels tightened the leash, but Rex would not yield. Every instinct in the dog was fixed on what lay below. The officer reluctantly followed, boots crunching over loose gravel. The deeper they went, the stronger the smell of mildew and rust. Water dripped slowly from the bridge joints above, echoing like an unwelcomed metronome. It was here, in the darkness beneath the bridge, that Rex began barking. Not a warning bark, not a challenge, but the deep, frantic bark of a dog who had uncovered something no one else had seen. Daniel shone his flashlight into the gloom. For a moment, the beam caught nothing but broken bottles, old blankets, and scattered debris. But then, as the light cut across the far corner, it landed on shapes. Human shapes. 3 men lay motionless on the ground, their uniforms faintly visible beneath layers of dirt and exhaustion. Torn combat fatigues told the story of who they were, Marines. Their bodies were weak, one man's chest rising shallowly, another barely moving at all. It was as though they had been discarded here beneath a forgotten bridge, left to vanish in the dark. Rex whined and stepped closer, circling the men, nose pressing against their boots and arms. He barked again, sharp and demanding, as if telling his handler there was no time to waste. Questions immediately clawed at Daniel's mind. Why were 3 Marines lying unconscious here? How had no one noticed them before? What could possibly explain their presence in such a desolate place, abandoned and on the brink of death? Rex stayed near the youngest-looking Marine, nudging at his sleeve and pressing his head close as though urging him to stay alive. Daniels radioed urgently for backup, describing the discovery with a tone that betrayed his own disbelief. While waiting for help to arrive, Rex would not leave the Marine's side. He paced around them, barking into the emptiness of the underpass, guarding them fiercely. The officer could only wonder if the dog sensed danger still lurking in the shadows. Soon, distant sirens began to cut through the silence. Red and blue lights flickered along the upper road before several vehicles pulled in. Paramedics rushed down first, kneeling by the Marines, checking pulses, attaching oxygen masks, and speaking in hurried tones. Officers followed close behind, their expressions hardening as they absorbed the surreal sight. The medics confirmed the Marines were alive, but only barely. Severe dehydration, untreated wounds, and near starvation had pushed them to the edge. It was a miracle they had held on long enough for Rex to find them. But the bigger question remained, why were they here at all? Marines were men of service, discipline, and loyalty. For 3 of them to be discovered like this, hidden under a city bridge, meant something darker was at play. Rex sniffed the ground again and pulled toward the embankment near the bridge pillars. He scratched at the soil, then barked sharply, his body rigid. Officers moved in with flashlights. Buried beneath loose gravel was a tattered duffel bag, half hidden. When they opened it, they found documents sealed in plastic, ration packs, and scraps of torn maps. The find deepened the mystery. Who left these Marines here with supplies that seemed prepared yet insufficient to sustain them? Was someone using them, abandoning them? The officers exchanged silent glances, but Rex kept barking, pulling them deeper. He stopped again near the wall of the bridge and pawed at the concrete. Embedded faintly was a mark, a carved symbol barely visible under the flashlight beam. It was military in design, yet strange, something that did not belong on civilian ground. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Could these Marines have stumbled upon something they were not meant to see? Were they betrayed? The paramedics worked swiftly, lifting the Marines onto stretchers. Their breathing stabilized slightly under the care, though none were yet conscious enough to speak. Their identities were confirmed by their uniforms and tags, but the circumstances of their condition remained buried in silence. Rex, however, would not rest. He paced between the Marines, circling them protectively as though declaring he would not allow harm to come to them again. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows, every muscle taut with purpose. For Daniels, the unease only grew. Something about the scene felt staged. The duffel bag, the symbol carved into the wall, the Marines left just barely alive. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle deliberately scattered, waiting to be solved. That night beneath the bridge ended not with answers, but with a growing storm of questions. As the ambulances pulled away, carrying the unconscious Marines into the night, Rex sat at the roadside, eyes fixed firmly on the darkness of the underpass. He had found the forgotten, and he knew instinctively that the truth behind them was not yet revealed. And in that silence, one thing became clear. This was not the end of the discovery. It was only the beginning. The bridge grew quiet again after the ambulances vanished into the distance, but the unease did not lift. Officer Daniels stood beside Rex, staring at the carved symbol on the bridge wall. It looked deliberate, not the kind of graffiti one expected in a forgotten corner of the city. Clean lines, sharp angles, and a design rooted in military familiarity. Daniels had seen enough service insignias to recognize discipline behind it, but this one was twisted, altered, as if its meaning had been changed to conceal rather than identify. The duffel bag, too, weighed heavily on his mind. The maps inside bore marks across remote rural areas, trails leading to places that were neither bases nor civilian towns. Some lines seemed to connect locations in a strange pattern, like a hidden path waiting to be followed. But why had it been buried instead of carried? Rex pawed at the gravel again, then lifted his head, ears standing tall. He gave a low growl, his nose twitching as if picking up a scent that lingered even after the Marines had been taken away. Daniels followed the dog's lead. Together they traced a path away from the bridge, down the embankment, and into the brush that crept along the river's edge. There, hidden beneath overgrowth, they discovered more. A piece of torn camouflage fabric caught on a branch, stained dark as though ripped during a desperate escape. Nearby, footprints pressed deep into the mud told of struggle. Some prints were heavy, others dragged, as if injured men had been forced to walk. The evidence pointed to something grim. The Marines had not simply collapsed under the bridge by chance. They had been brought here, possibly left intentionally, their survival hanging by a thread. Over the next days, investigations deepened. The Marines, stabilized at the military hospital, remained unconscious, unable to provide answers. Officers combed the area near the bridge, finding nothing but faint tire tracks leading to the road above. The symbol on the wall was photographed and sent to analysts, but no immediate match appeared in records. Through it all, Rex stayed restless. Every visit back to the bridge saw him circling the site with heightened alertness, barking at corners no one else thought twice about. His instincts screamed that something was unfinished here. Then came the call from the hospital. One of the Marines, the youngest, had regained consciousness for a brief window. His words were fragmented, his mind still clouded with trauma, but one phrase was clear enough to strike fear into everyone present. Not abandoned, betrayed. The meaning of those words cut sharp. These were not lost soldiers, not victims of misfortune. They were survivors of something orchestrated. Someone had left them under that bridge with purpose. Investigators pushed harder. They followed the maps, the strange markings, and the trail began to point toward an abandoned training ground miles outside the city. Once a place for exercises, it had long been decommissioned, left to rot behind rusted fences and broken watchtowers. But reports surfaced that in recent months, lights had been seen there at night, vehicles entering when no one was supposed to be present. Rex was brought along on the search. As soon as the convoy reached the perimeter of the old training ground, the dog stiffened, nose pressed into the air, tail rigid. He barked once, sharply, then pulled toward the gate. Officers moved cautiously, weapons ready, but Rex pushed forward, dragging Daniels past weeds and broken fences until they stood before one of the old storage bunkers. The heavy steel door bore scratches, fresh compared to the decay around it. Muddy footprints scattered nearby, some boot-shaped, some larger. It was clear someone had been using this place recently. When the door was forced open, a rush of damp air spilled out. Inside, the bunker smelled of oil and old metal, but deeper in lay evidence that chilled the room. Cots lined the wall, ration crates stacked against corners, and more documents scattered across a table. Among them were photographs, surveillance-style images of the very Marines now lying in the hospital. It was not random. These men had been watched, tracked, and targeted. Rex growled low, his eyes fixed on a corner where a blanket covered a box. When officers pulled it aside, they found radios and coded sheets marked with times and locations. The evidence pointed to a larger operation, something concealed within shadows of military routine, and something that had no intention of being exposed. Every discovery raised new questions. Why were these Marines chosen? Who was behind the tracking? And what purpose did leaving them beneath the bridge serve? But there was no denying one truth. The dog had led them here. Without Rex, the trail would have gone cold. The connection between the bridge and the training ground lost in the haze of speculation. Still, the most crucial piece was missing. No one yet knew who was orchestrating this or why the Marines were meant to vanish quietly without explanation. And with one survivor's haunting words of betrayal, the suspicion grew heavier. This was not the work of outsiders, but something darker, closer, and more dangerous. The days stretched into nights, officers and military investigators piecing together fragments of maps and coded papers. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Coordinates circling a route that ran from the city's outskirts to an isolated storage depot near the docks. It looked like supply runs, but the timing and secrecy suggested something else. Rex remained the constant. At the hospital, he sat beside the recovering Marines, pressing his head against their beds, as though guarding them from shadows that still lingered. At investigation sites, he led officers with uncanny precision, each bark unlocking another detail hidden in the puzzle. Then came the breakthrough. Tire tracks found near the docks matched those by the bridge. The same vehicle that had left the Marines to die had traveled there repeatedly. Surveillance near the area was ordered, but it was Rex, during a late-night patrol, who first reacted. His ears shot up, nose pressed to the air, and he pulled Daniels into a narrow alley where faint headlights flickered near the depot gates. The vehicle was there. The discovery shifted everything. Whatever was being hidden, whatever had led to the Marines' betrayal, the answer lay within that depot, and the moment was approaching when the truth would no longer stay buried. But as officers prepared to act, the question loomed heavier than ever. Who inside the chain of command could possibly be behind this, and why target their own men? The trail was hot, the pieces were aligning, and yet the danger was greater than anyone realized. Rex stood poised, every muscle ready, eyes fixed on the depot ahead. He had uncovered what humans might have missed, but the final confrontation was near, and it would reveal more than betrayal. It would reveal the truth that no one wanted to face. The night at the docks was heavy with tension. The air carried the smell of salt water and diesel, a thick haze hanging over the warehouse depot that loomed against the shoreline. Officers stayed hidden in the shadows, waiting for the signal. Somewhere inside those walls was the answer to the questions that had haunted them since the bridge. Rex stood low to the ground, nose twitching, his sharp eyes locked on the faint movements at the gate. A truck backed in slowly, headlights cut, its cargo bed covered beneath heavy tarps. Figures moved with military precision, loading crates into the building. What stood out was not their skill but their secrecy. These were no random criminals. They knew structure, discipline, and they carried themselves like men who had once worn the same uniform as the Marines, lying in hospital beds. Daniels gave Rex a quiet gesture, and the dog surged forward, pulling toward the side of the depot. His instincts pressed hard, leading the officers to a side entrance nearly concealed by stacks of discarded barrels. They slipped inside, flashlights dimmed, rifles steady. What they found shattered the silence. Rows of crates stretched deep into the warehouse, each marked with military insignias, but the contents were not standard supplies. Weapons, high-grade equipment, and ration packs filled the boxes. More shocking still were files laid out across a central table, lists of names, deployment schedules, and surveillance notes. At the top of one file sat the same symbol carved into the bridge wall. The betrayal was real. This was not just smuggling, it was theft from within, orchestrated with precision, using Marines as pawns. Those three young men had stumbled too close to the operation, uncovering what they were never meant to see. Instead of protecting them, someone higher had ordered them silenced. Left under the bridge, their disappearance would have been written off as desertion or misfortune. But Rex had changed everything. A sharp bark cut through the silence. The dog stiffened, then lunged toward a dark corner of the depot. From the shadows, a figure emerged, armed, eyes widening at the sight of intruders. The man bolted, sprinting toward the back exit, but Rex was faster. His paws thundered against the concrete, his powerful frame leaping forward until he brought the man down, holding him until officers closed in. When the mask of darkness lifted, the captured figure revealed what none had wanted to believe: a decorated officer, a man trusted with command. His betrayal had run deeper than greed. He had been feeding equipment into black markets, using Marines as expendable obstacles when they threatened exposure. The bridge had been his disposal ground. The evidence was undeniable. Documents, shipments, and testimony from the surviving Marine who had whispered of betrayal. Together they built a case that no one could silence. But through the process, one image stayed sharp in everyone's mind. Rex barking beneath the bridge, refusing to leave three broken soldiers in the dark. He had not only saved lives, he had preserved honor. In the weeks that followed, the story reached beyond the shadows of secrecy. The Marines recovered slowly, their strength returning day by day in the quiet safety of the hospital. They carried scars both seen and unseen, but they were alive, and they owed that survival to a dog who refused to give up on them. Rex visited often, his head resting against the hands of the recovering men. Their bond grew quickly, unspoken yet powerful, the kind of connection forged not in comfort but in the raw edge of survival. For Daniels, pride in his partner swelled with every moment. Rex had followed nothing but instinct and loyalty, yet uncovered a betrayal that might have buried itself forever. Without him, three Marines would have died nameless beneath a forgotten bridge, and a corrupt operation would have thrived unchecked. Recognition soon followed. The city gathered in solemn ceremony, not just to honor the Marines' resilience, but to acknowledge the four-legged hero at the center of it all. Rex stood on the stage beside his handler, his eyes calm, his posture proud. The Marines, now able to stand with support, joined them. Their presence was living proof of what loyalty could save. The truth, once hidden in darkness, now shone clear before the crowd. Betrayal had tried to bury them, silence had tried to erase them, but loyalty, unwavering, instinctive, and fierce, had brought them back. Rex received his medal, a glint of silver against his dark fur, but for the Marines standing behind him, no honor could ever fully capture what he had given them: their lives, their chance to return home, and the reminder that even in the coldest betrayal, trust still existed. And for the officers who had pieced together the puzzle, the story ended not in tragedy but in triumph. The corrupt operation was dismantled, those responsible brought to justice, and the shadows cleared away by a dog who simply followed the truth. In the end, beneath the bridge where it all began, flowers were laid by the community. Not for loss, but for gratitude, because what might have been a graveyard of silence became a testament to survival. Rex sat quietly as the ceremony ended, his eyes fixed not on the applause but on the horizon. For him, it had never been about medals or recognition. It was about the lives he had refused to leave behind, the loyalty he had chosen without hesitation. 3 Marines lived because he barked that night. And the truth, once buried beneath concrete and betrayal, was free at last. If this story gave you chills, just wait until you hear what happens in the next one. You don't want to miss it, so make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the bell. And if you felt the bond of this brave K9, give this video a like. It really helps more people discover stories like this.